Welcome, everyone. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today. Okay, let's dive right into this explainer on what is arguably one of the most famous business books ever written, Jim Collins' Good to Great. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a nonprofit leader, or just a focused learner who loves breaking down what makes organizations tick, you are absolutely in the right place.
So, here's the core mystery we're going to unravel today. With over 4.5 million copies sold, Good to Great promised this definitive, foolproof framework for success. But how exactly did 11 specific companies make that legendary leap from simply being good to becoming truly great? And honestly, perhaps more importantly, when we strip away all the hype and look at the hard data years later, did they actually survive and stay great? To figure that out, here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the blueprint for greatness, then look at getting on the bus, followed by hedgehogs and brutal facts. After that, we'll examine the survivorship illusion, move beyond the Fortune 500, and finally ask, is greatness sustainable?
Let's kick things off with Section 1, the blueprint for greatness, and that famous 11-company filter. Think about this scale for a second. When Jim Collins and his research team set out to find the secrets of sustained corporate success, they didn't just cherry-pick their favorite brands. They built a massive, incredibly rigorous filtering system. They started with a staggering pool of 1,435 Fortune 500 companies. Then, through exhaustive financial analysis, basically looking for companies that showed a pattern of good performance followed by a sudden, sustained leap to great performance over 15 years, they whittled that massive list down to just 11 true greats.
But they didn't just stop there. To really figure out what drove the transformation, they played a giant game of spot the difference. They paired each of those 11 great companies with a direct industry comparator. We're talking about companies like Upjohn, Bethlehem Steel, and Eckert, organizations that had the exact same opportunities, the exact same industry conditions, but completely failed to make the leap. By intensely studying the contrast between the winners and the comparators, this whole framework was born.
Moving right along to Section 2, getting on the bus. First, who, then what. This brings us to literally one of the most famous metaphors in modern management, and it flips conventional wisdom totally on its head. Most leaders, they assume that the first step to greatness is the what, setting a bold new vision, drafting a brilliant new strategy, and figuring out where to drive the company. But Collins found the exact opposite. The great leaders started with the who. They figured out how to get the right people on the bus, the wrong people off the bus, and the right people into the right seats, long before they ever decided where to actually drive it.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the psychology behind these three truths. Think about it. If your team is on the bus because they deeply believe in the who, the people around them, they can adapt to almost any change in direction. The right people are also self-motivated by this inner drive for excellence. And get this, it's pretty wild. The research team fully expected executive compensation to be the magic lever for motivation. But they were dead wrong. There was absolutely no systematic pattern linking massive executive pay to greatness. It's not about how you compensate people. It's about having people whose own internal moral code practically requires building excellence.
All right, Section 3, hedgehogs and brutal facts. Navigating reality.
So, once you've actually got the right people on the bus, how do they think? What are the strategic mental models these unique leaders utilize? Well, it all starts at the top with what Collins termed Level 5 leadership. And this completely shatters the myth of the egocentric, larger-than-life celebrity CEO swooping in to save the day. Level 5 leaders are quiet, they're self-effacing, almost stoic. But do not mistake that humility for weakness. They possess a ferocious, indomitable resolve to do absolutely whatever it takes to make the company great, channeling all their ambition into the organization's cause, not their own public profile.
And that quiet resolve feeds perfectly into the hedgehog concept. This is based on that old parable, right? The fox knows a lot of things, but the hedgehog knows one big thing. Great companies find this crystalline intersection of what they are deeply passionate about, what drives their economic engine, and crucially, what they can be the absolute best in the world at. This requires dodging what's called the curse of competence. Look, just because you are making money at something doesn't actually mean you can be the best in the world at it.
But holding all this together requires mastering the Stockdale Paradox, named after Admiral Jim Stockdale. It's this dual mindset where you must maintain unwavering faith that you will prevail in the end, while simultaneously having the relentless discipline to confront the brutal facts of your current reality. And honestly, to truly understand this explainer, we've got to practice the Stockdale Paradox ourselves right now and confront some incredibly brutal facts about the book's own research data.
Which brings us to Section 4, the survivorship illusion. The academic antithesis.
Look, Good to Great was a monster commercial hit, but we have to look objectively at the severe critiques launched by academia regarding its methodology. Critics point out that by selecting the winners after they had already won, rather than predicting them beforehand, the research falls into a massive trap. This brilliantly, though unfortunately, illustrates the concept of survivorship bias. It studies the survivors while completely ignoring the graveyard of failed companies that may have worked just as hard, had perfectly humble leaders, and focused on their core strength, but still ended up going bankrupt.
These academic critiques pull no punches. Phil Rosenzweig argues that relying on retrospective magazine articles introduces the halo effect, meaning a company's financial success casts a positive halo over all its internal processes, basically making everything look like a stroke of genius in hindsight. He also warns against confusing correlation with causation. Plus, Peter C. DeMarco highlights that by placing good in direct opposition to great, the framework might have unintentionally created a proxy for corporate greed, pushing companies to take wild, extreme risks just in the name of chasing greatness.
But here is the absolute most brutal fact of all. A really rigorous study, published in the Academy of Management Perspectives, applied modern portfolio theory to track these exact 11 companies after the book was published. And only one of the 11 companies actually sustained its superior stock market performance. The other 10 fell back to average, or literally faced bankruptcy, like Circuit City. Greatness, at least when defined by these specific market metrics, was largely unsustained. Ouch.
So, let's pivot to Section 5, Beyond the Fortune 500, Adapting the Message.
So what does this all mean? Do we just toss the whole book in the trash? Well, no, not at all. A fascinating synthesis happened when these concepts were applied to smaller organizations completely away from Wall Street. For small and mid-market enterprises, the real value isn't in trying to replicate a multi-billion-dollar stock chart. It's about agility. Small companies can take that hedgehog concept to stop chasing every shiny new market trend and just double down on their core strengths. They can apply big league discipline, but execute it with startup speed.
And if you're in the nonprofit or social sector, Collins actually wrote a follow-up monograph clarifying that greatness isn't strictly about business metrics anyway. Because there's no profit motive, social sector leaders have to replace financial returns with a rigorous, disciplined tracking of mission delivery. It's all about calibrating success by establishing a clear baseline and then obsessively assessing your progress based on the tangible, real-world impact you're making.
Finally, Section 6. Is greatness sustainable? The final verdict.
We've traced the whole journey today, right? From that massive 11-company blueprint to the harsh reality check of survivorship bias, and finally seeing how these principles found fresh life in mission-driven organizations. The overall message from the book really boils down to this. Whether you are running a massive global corporation, a scrappy local startup, or a community nonprofit, greatness is not just handed to you by lucky circumstances. It is absolutely a matter of conscious, disciplined choices made by humble, focused people every single day. So I'm going to leave you with this to chew on. Based on everything we've unpacked in this explainer today, is greatness really a final destination that a company magically reaches and just stays at forever? Or is it simply a daily, relentless discipline that you must wake up and practice? Thank you so much for exploring these ideas with me today. Keep asking the hard questions and keep learning.